This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Another day, another discovery. This discovery today is definitely going to make your head shake. So before we get into it, help the kid out, hit that like button, make sure that you're subscribed, and let's get into this new rabbit hole. So in yesterday's video, I went ahead and talked about this book, Divide and Rule by Catherine Mayer, and explained the background of this author and her close ties to the royal family, especially to King Charles. As I explained yesterday, Divide and Rule, Royal Women and Their Battles by Catherine Mayer examines how some of the most famous women in British royal history, including Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth I, Diana, Catherine, and Meghan, have been portrayed, compared, and often pitted against one another by the media and public opinion. Now, it's my opinion, but I do think that there is a connection here with the palace and this book getting commissioned. To quickly recap, this author argues that many popular narratives about these women are oversimplified or distorted, and seeks to present them as more complex historical figures with significant influence on the monarchy, essentially justifying Meghan's crass and just overly aggressive behavior, giving her the benefit of the doubt because she's an American and that she uses her voice, as opposed to Catherine, Sophie, Camilla, who stay in line and keep their mouths shut. This author also explores how conflicts surrounding royal women reflect broader cultural and political divisions in modern society. Now, those that have followed me over the last 5 years, I've always said that Harry and Meghan's purpose was not for them to come over here and find their freedom and, go live the American dream. I've always said that this couple came here with political intentions. The first thing Meghan did when she got to the United States was sit down with Gloria Steinem to sit down and talk about how important it is to vote. And during that time in 2020, we saw how Harry and Meghan contributed to this color revolution that was going on. We didn't know at the time that it was a color revolution because, that stuff is not supposed to happen in a functioning democracy. So no one suspected that someone like Prince Harry, who we've all watched grow up in front of our eyes, was going to be meddling and getting involved in political affairs here in the United States. That was something that many people couldn't wrap their brains around. When Prince Harry said the First Amendment was bonkers back in 2020, nobody at the time took him seriously. Sure, there were Americans who were annoyed that he had the audacity to insult our Constitution, but nobody thought that deep down inside, that's how he really felt. Anyway, it was brushed off, and we welcomed him here. Nobody suspected what these two were covertly going to be doing. Harry and Meghan had these alignments already set up before they even got to the United States, which means the palace did help them to a certain extent. And in yesterday's video, this one important detail from this book validates and confirms what I have been speculating for the last 3 years, which is Harry and Meghan lied about their so-called Mexit, and the story around it collapses. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and if you didn't see that video, please go check that video out and go to I think the middle of the video, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, that explains how it would have been impossible, as well as information that shows that Harry and Meghan were in California, not in Canada. Which means the palace lied, especially when it came down to the Sandringham Summit and discussions about Canada and their security. It's likely after Harry came back from the Sandringham Summit, Harry and Meghan took off for the United States because in February, Harry and Meghan were touring the universities, specifically ones in California, like Stanford and UCLA, to meet up with those folks that were part of this censorship industrial complex, like Renee DeResta, Safiya Noble, Tristan Harris. I believe they also met up with professors who specialize in the study of how to manipulate people online from a psychology standpoint. So yeah, they knew what they were coming over here to do. It's looking more and more like the palace was in collusion here to spin a narrative that is actually not true anymore. Which blows up the whole narrative around Harry and Meghan having to flee for California because they were discovered by the paparazzi and had to get out of the country because the borders were going to be shut because of COVID. No, they were already in the United States. The whole thing is a lie. And it makes total sense because if indeed Harry and Meghan came over here in a covert capacity, it doesn't matter if Donald Trump was president at the time, because President Obama had his people burrowed in the Department of Homeland Security, the agency that would give clearance to these two fools. I've always said that whatever's in those visa documents will tell us whether or not we've been told the truth. And I don't think we have been, because I bet you the visa documents tell a very different story. And this is why there is so much pushback on disclosing any information from it. I bet the real reason at the time for the holdup was to protect the crown. And I think it's the same thing here with these Department of State files, where everybody sees how they are dragging their feet. And once they finally release the first batch, they're going to be drip feeding these almost 3,000 pages of information. God only knows how much is going to be redacted, or if we're going to make any kind of sense out of what they release. I think by now we all see that something's up here. Because if indeed Harry really did come over here to find freedom and to live a private and independent life, there wouldn't be so many files on you with the Department of State. Unless there is international involvement here with another country, which is what I suspect is going on here. So now going back to this book and looking at the choice that was made for this front cover, you have at the top Anne Boleyn, and then you have Meghan and Catherine, and then you have Queen Victoria. Why didn't they put Diana on this cover? Or why didn't they put the late queen on this cover? Obviously, part of it is for selling books, but strategically, there's more meaning to all of this. Did you know that it was Queen Victoria who really started off the whole concept of intelligence sharing by using her children and grandchildren to advance British influence in Europe through these dynastic marriages and private correspondence? So it was Queen Victoria who really laid this concept of expanding British soft power through her family. These members often acted as unofficial diplomatic intermediaries with this gray area of sharing information. Now, that's not the reason why Queen Victoria is on this cover. My guess, in the way that Catherine Mayer, the author, paints Queen Victoria as a feminist who became a lot stronger once her husband died. But she did indicate that Queen Victoria was very political. So I want you to keep in the back of your head what I just said about Queen Victoria using her family to expand British soft power, because it's going to be very relevant when we talk about Harry and Meghan in a second. So now let's focus on these three women, Anne Boleyn, Meghan Markle, and Princess Catherine. Out of the three, can you tell me who is the commoner raised to royalty? Who celebrated as someone who could modernize the monarchy? Who hated by others as an outsider? Who accused of being too dark, too ambitious, too difficult? Whose marriage became deeply controversial? And whose departure remains fiercely disputed? If you all said Meghan Markle, you're wrong. No shit, but this is how historians described Anne Boleyn. Sure, we know how Meghan loves to cosplay Diana. But is she doing that because she's trying to be Diana, or is she doing that as a way to control Harry? And knows that it's going to gaslight the public. But it will also create controversy and get people talking. And I guarantee that a lot of the times when she pulls these stunts, it's really for just that, distraction. Now, if you are in the same camp with me and believe that this endless drama and saga with Harry and Meghan is some sort of black operations, then you'll understand when I say that this so-called character, this woman we're calling Meghan Markle, was modeled after Anne Boleyn. I don't think that it was karmic coincidence that Harry and Meghan got married on May 19th, the same day that Anne Boleyn had been executed. I believe that that date was purposely chosen, not because it was revenge against Meghan, but because this was the role that she was playing. She was the modern-day Anne Boleyn. One thing I don't think anybody has talked about is that past royal weddings never fell on a Saturday. And that's because not only was it considered a state occasion due to the monarch being present, but also because of the ease of security. Catherine got married on a Wednesday. Now, back then, this point was raised, which the BBC had a reply already stating that, oh, the reason why this is breaking from tradition and being held on Saturday is because more people can attend and watch. They won't be at work. I call bullshit. After all of this that we have gone through and what I'm uncovering now, pure bullshit. Meghan described this wedding accurately. This was indeed just a spectacle. What made me look into this new angle further was this passage from Catherine Mayer's book, right here. Apparently, Anne Boleyn had this motto, Semper Idem, which meant always the same or as ever. You know, the same as ever, whatever business that Meghan is running right now. Do I think it's a coincidence? Definitely not. Definitely not. So this little detail provoked me further, and there are more parallels here that I'm going to show you. Let's go ahead and start off with Anne Boleyn's family, her father particularly. Can anybody guess what his name is? Well, that would be Thomas. Yeah, the same Thomas like Meghan's father, alleged father. Then you have Anne Boleyn's older sister, Mary, who happened to be a blonde while Anne Boleyn was dark-toned, dark hair. And did you know that these two weren't very close? And in fact, Anne Boleyn's sister, Mary, was quite jealous of Anne Boleyn. In fact, Anne Boleyn had banished her sister because she embarrassed the family. And then you have Anne's little brother, George, whom historians have said was a lively and quirky kind of guy. And what about the mother? Well, not much is really known about her. In fact, historians say that she pretty much stayed in the background. So now looking at the Boleyn family, you can't help but see those parallels with the Markle family. So when you take it a step further and you look at Anne Boleyn's coat of arms and see that she too also has some type of bird, you know, we're at this point 10 years later that there's no such thing anymore as coincidences. You know, this had to have been set up, scripted, and planned from day one. That this was what Meghan was going to be, and this was the role that she was going to play, because at the end of the day, Anne Boleyn and her claim to fame was for stepping into the political arena and challenging the boundaries of what a queen consort could influence. That was her claim to fame. So now getting back to Queen Victoria and the principle of her sending her children and her grandchildren to expand British soft power, I think it's highly possible that this is what they were trying to do with sending this douchebag over here to America with Meghan. I think by now we all see and know that the royals communicate through symbols and gestures. Like take for instance in this photo. Here is the late Queen meeting with Justin Trudeau with blue and yellow flowers strategically placed in between. Now this meeting happened right as the Ukraine war broke out, which some have said that this was a small subtle gesture to show Ukraine that they had the Queen's support. It's no secret, but the Queen adored Barack Obama. And it appears that there was somewhat of a close relationship.
Her Majesty had invited Michelle and the two girls to tea. She had then offered the girls to drive in her golden carriage around the grounds of Buckingham Palace.
I reiterate what I said yesterday. Barack Obama is the only president that has met the Wales' children. On this state visit with Barack Obama in 2011, the Obamas gave the late Queen this brooch. She chose to wear this brooch the night of the embassy dinner to show her appreciation for the relationship. It's kind of bizarre that Tom Hanks is standing there with them, right? Okay, so now fast forward 7 years to July 12, 2018 for Donald Trump's first state visit. As you can see, it's a very different scene to the second go-around. First go-around, William and Catherine nowhere in sight to greet the First Lady and our President after they got off of Marine One. And what was the Queen doing at the time Donald Trump touched down for his state visit? Well, she was meeting with Sheikh Ahmad Al-Taib, who is the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, alongside with Justin Welby, who was at the time the Archbishop of Canterbury. This was a private audience to discuss interfaith. But of all the brooches that the Queen could have chosen, she chooses the one she wore 7 years prior when she saw Barack Obama. I believe that that was a message being sent and was deliberate. So do I believe that the Queen was on board with all of this globalist shit? You bet I do. Obama is a Muslim. I don't think it's an accident that she chose to wear the brooch that Barack Obama gave her to meet with this imam. So do I think that the Queen was on the same page with the rest of these globalists getting ready for the 2020 election? Yeah, I do. The royals love their symbolism. When you look at this psychologically closer, all of these coincidences and parallels that tie back to Anne Boleyn, I don't think are coincidences anymore. So now getting back to the cover of this book, it now makes sense as to why she chose to put Catherine and Meghan, because the parallel here is that Anne Boleyn, Meghan being the modern day Anne Boleyn's arch nemesis, her name was also Catherine. Again, I think this was all very deliberate, especially getting married on the day that Anne Boleyn was executed. That was a deliberate choice. I also think it was deliberate that they modeled this woman that we're calling Meghan Markle after Anne Boleyn because Prince Harry, his name is Henry. And who did Anne Boleyn end up marrying? She married Henry VIII, who was the spare. Everything that was crafted around this black operations had a purpose, had a meaning. Everything that we see about this woman we're calling Meghan Markle is deliberate. It's almost too ridiculous now looking back at everything, but guess what? It worked. They were able to steal the election. And look what happened during the Biden regime. Look at how much damage that was caused, but look at how rich these oligarchs became. Meghan and Harry played a part in all of this. They almost succeeded. I can't bear to think what would have happened had we lost 2024. But it doesn't mean that we take our eye off the ball because these globalists will stop at nothing. Anyhow, just thought I would share with you to get you to see things a little bit differently. Yeah, we're not being told the full story. And I've said this from day one. Harry and Meghan were political. They always had been political. But we just were too distracted by all the noise deliberately intended to keep us distracted. So folks, let this be a lesson. Anyhow, let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye. It was such a fraud.